Welcome to Voices of the Community, which explores critical issues facing Northern California communities. We introduce you to the voices of community thought leaders and change makers who are working on solutions that face our fellow individual community members, neighborhoods, cities, and our region. This is George Koster, your host. This episode is part of our series exploring COVID-19's impact on nonprofits and small businesses in San Francisco. We started the series back in April of 2020 during the height of the first phase of the COVID-19 pandemic and the shelter-in-place requirements. Over these past 9 months, the COVID-19 pandemic and economic meltdown has wiped out millions of jobs in both the nonprofit and small business sectors, as well as shuttered tens of thousands of small business operations. The goal of the series is to shine a spotlight on the nonprofits, small businesses, and their staff who are struggling to deal with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on their operations, services, and sustainability. The series of interviews we conducted features voices from a cross-section of organizations that make up the fabric of our community. Each of them brings a unique perspective on how they and we are dealing with the issues facing our community during the global pandemic and economic depression.
Most need capital, and now it's becoming urgent. And so they need another government stimulus package or some kind of capital to survive, especially the winter. You have to consider that many manufacturers will make 50 to 70% of their annual revenue in the last 2 or 3 months of the year. And right now, no one knows what's going to happen.
In this episode, our featured voice is Pierre Coeurdeuil, Director of Advising and Education at SFMade. San Francisco had forgotten its history of manufacturing with all of the latest booms, such as the first .com boom, then the biotech boom, and now tech boom 2.0. In 2009, Mark Dwight, founder of Timbuk2 and Rickshaw Bags, came together with Kate Sofis and Janet Lees to launch the nonprofit SFMade. Over the last 10 years, SFMade has focused on enabling manufacturing to return to its place in our community and economy and to bring the jobs and products back into our lives.
I'm joined remotely via Zoom by Pierre Coeurdeuil from SFMade. Thanks for being here, Pierre.
Thank you for having us.
I would love to start the show with Pierre having you provide a little background on what is SFMade and how does SFMade work with makers and small manufacturers like Michelle and Nana Joe's.
SFMade is a nonprofit created in 2010, and you can look at it differently from the manufacturer's perspective and from the public's perspective. To manufacturers, we're both a way to create community and also to receive some advice and education on how to start and grow your business, how to stay in the city, and how to hire from a local and diverse workforce. We work directly with manufacturers, large and small, and we provide services like educational workshops, direct advising from our in-house staff, and also from volunteer advisors. And we adapt this advising to the company. It can go from long-term and light touch, some kind of mentorship on business growth and strategy, all the way to deep advising, probably for something like 10 to 20 hours over a short period of months, just a few months or weeks, and on topics that can be a little deeper, like production efficiency, supply chain, finance, online marketing these days, you name it. And you may hear me say our members, because we're a nonprofit, but you have to join and become a member. Members are all manufacturing companies headquartered and making their products in the city. Anyone is free to join as a member. You don't have to pay for it. The only thing is we ask that people fill out one survey a year so we can tell the story of what's happening to manufacturers and to the whole sector. So that's from the point of view of manufacturers. And to the public, SFMade is a logo. We are lucky to have banners all around town that when it's on products shows that a product is made in San Francisco. And we're also the organizers of holiday fairs. Used to be one at Pinterest in November and one at CCA in the design district right across from our headquarters in December, where all the products you buy are made in the city. And this year is just testing it out online, only open to Pinterest employees, but hopefully we're going to open it to the public starting next year if everything works out and if we cannot do it in person. Overall, we're really a network and a way to find local products and their makers.
Pierre, how has COVID-19 impacted the operations of SFMade, and then how have you and your team pivoted to try to support all of the makers like Michelle?
I've heard the term pivot so many times these past few months. It's crazy. We used to meet with companies and business owners all the time and moved obviously to phone. And now everyone is comfortable with Zoom and video chats. It's not the same because you don't get the same visual cues. You're going to tour facilities, and we don't have group meetings anymore, which was a great way to share issues, learn, and network with others. Otherwise, we still help our members with direct advising, with hiring, finding space, although not so many people look for space these days, but some industries are still hiring a lot, and connection to local resources. On the public side, there's no more fairs, but still some educational workshops, and our staff is working remotely, at least on the operational side. That's the main change. In terms of how we adapted our services during COVID, we've never been busier, especially earlier on. And we increased our communication frequency because we stay in touch with members. We have a newsletter dedicated to our manufacturers, and we moved from a monthly frequency to weekly. And from 20% of members in general opening our emails, we increased to 70%. So a lot more people, thankfully, read what we're writing, and we've shifted our services. I think we've been really helpful in being the creators and the aggregator of the manufacturing specific resources and information during COVID, because there were so many things out there, we could digest it for everyone. We've moved our direct advising to remote most of the time. Our workshops are online. And what's been interesting is we've been dealing with core business issues that have been arising. It really started with workforce reduction, unfortunately. How do I furlough or lay off my staff for many businesses that were completely shut down? How do I access capital to survive? And then with that capital, once all the admin work is done and I finally have it, how do I reopen? How do I rehire? How do I reopen safely? So we've worked on implementing health and safety rules. And now the focus is more, how do I rebuild revenue and pivot or adapt to selling as much as possible direct and online, which is difficult because the noise is crazy out there. And some of our funding has been affected, or maybe in the future, and that's another thing that may impact us.
Can you share a story with how SFMade is helped incubate someone like Michelle and Anna Joe's to bring them to market? And part of that would be, what do you feel like has been the largest impact of SFMade on small manufacturers, makers, our local economy? The whole multiplier of someone like Michelle's work is all of the people she hires as well. And I think people lose track of that.
So there are two things, how we've helped companies like Nana Joe's in the past and during COVID. They're pretty different things. Before COVID, the biggest impact was probably when we can help with direct hires, with especially people with barriers to employment, like formerly homeless or formerly incarcerated, or when we can make sure that a manufacturer can grow in the city. Like our biggest success story of the past 2 years is chocolate manufacturer Charles Chocolates, who found a larger production space that they could still afford in the same neighborhood that tripled the size of their space, which we're super happy that this could happen and we could keep them in the city. Or when I mentioned advising projects, when we can actually help a manufacturer with huge efficiency gains, like a decrease in lead times and increase in volumes. These are the success stories that we use to really care for the most. And the biggest overall impact, both before and during the pandemic, is that it's about creating a network of manufacturers, like giving a voice to the manufacturing sector, to the city, our funders, everyone, hopefully the public, and then really helping manufacturers know and talk to each other and often partner with each other, which we're always super happy to see. During COVID, the main thing is we were a source of information, like filtering the information applicable, was the programs applicable, the help applicable to manufacturers large and small. There were so many local and government programs for everyone, every business, that we were the voice of manufacturers. Hopefully that's what we wanted to be. And also helping you protect your employees and your business by finding capital. A good example is we helped Nana Joe's get a PPP loan, took to the city to help create the health and safety rules so manufacturers in general could reopen quickly and safely. In addition to our staff specializing in some areas, like our director of workforce, Claire Michaels, knew all the details about the FFCRA, all the workforce programs, and also the local ones, many programs that could help manufacturers. And I was the person keeping track of all the loan and grant programs in particular, all the many changes around the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program loan that basically transformed into a grant if you met all the criteria. In addition to that, we've always been working with employment and tax lawyers, with bankers, with lots of professionals that are ready to help pro bono and that we called on often during the pandemic. We're trying to be a voice for manufacturers and bringing all the advice that they might need at all times, especially during a pandemic. One thing that I wanted to mention, just because it's what's needed right now, we have been able to help, especially accessing capital, reopening, and right now trying to sell more direct and online. But right now, even though most manufacturers seem to be able to survive through the pandemic, most need capital, and now it's becoming urgent. And so they need another government stimulus package or some kind of capital to survive, especially the winter. You have to consider that many manufacturers will make 50 to 70% of their annual revenue in the last 2 or 3 months of the year. And right now, no one knows what's going to happen because there are no direct events. There's very little corporate buying for the holidays, but no one really knows what to produce in preparation for the holidays and what to expect.
People watching, listening, how can they support SFMade or the small companies like Manajos within the ecosystem of SFMade?
It's more the companies. We're always happy if you give a donation to SFMade. We're mostly relying on larger funders. So the easiest, simplest, best thing you can do is really buy local. Make a conscious effort to look for businesses and products that are made not just in San Francisco, but around where you live, wherever that may be. I mean, looking for products made close to where you are in grocery stores is one great thing, but it's not always, depending where you shop, it's not always easy. So try and buy online. Don't buy everything on Amazon, but look around where you are, go to your local stores as much as you can, and spend some time on research. I think it's more important than ever to buy products, not just made locally, but by businesses with good values. That's why we have, for example, in San Francisco, Nana Joe's has the SF Green Business label. All these labels are there for a reason, and they can really help you certify that the companies are good ones. Businesses that respect their employees, if you check their stories, whatever they're putting out there on social media, if they put forward their employees, that's pretty telling. And of course, businesses that are owned by or hire many people of color and with barriers to employment. And again, these stories are found on social media very often. And so it's a good way to learn about the companies you're buying from. And you'll feel good for buying local, and you'll support your local economy, which is going to be absolutely critical in the next few months and years. And we're here to try and help. So feel free to reach out to SFMade if we can help you connect with local businesses, people that make stuff really close to where you are. We're happy to do that, but it's something that you can definitely research yourself. Don't try and buy everything from the large retailers online. They're not helping the small people around you at all.
Out of this pandemic here, what do you think are some of the good things that could happen to support our small manufacturers, our locally based business and retailers here in San Francisco?
I'm not sure what can happen to support them, but I can tell you the positive things we've seen happen. Many manufacturing businesses are thankfully farsighted, and many have enough capital set aside for rainy days, and that has helped them stay in business so far. And they're incredibly resourceful. Again, I'm going to use the term pivot. That's really what many did. They right-sized, they refocused on what they did best and adapted to the situation. I can give you 3 examples. Some really saw what worked well during the pandemic and focused on their niche. Jenny Lemon has a small retail store in the Mission, and she realized that her retail store was dead. And how would she sell her apparel and her small DIY products? What she did is focus on online classes for corporate teams, and that worked really well. Everyone has read about the brewers and distillers who started making hand sanitizer. You do whatever you can to adapt and really focus on what's needed. Many advanced manufacturers made PPE, personal protective equipment, and that kind of stuff. Some adapted really well, pivoted really well, like some specialized stores selling food or beverage, coffee most of the time, turned into general stores to attract a wider clientele and stay open, and also to highlight different products made locally. Churn Urban Creamery is one in the Portola. Ritual Coffee Roasters did that as well. The third example, where people organized programs where the public could buy coffee, pastries, and products to be donated to healthcare and frontline workers. And that was awesome. The perfect storm. It's driving sales to the business to keep them afloat. It's doing a good deed. The public is doing a good deed, and it just creates some feel-good marketing. I mean, it's just a complete win on every side. And that's where Andytown did something that I found was great, which is give a chance to the public to buy not just Andytown products, but also other products made here like Nana Joe's. And I think you got some good business out of it because the program was just super popular. Brewers are far-sighted, thankfully. They adapted super well, and they seem to help each other. Partnered on joint releases like Andytown helped Nana Joe's, but it's really a give and take because it's always like this. And overall, we're super happy to see that manufacturers will stick together, help each other.
Thank you, Pierre. That was great with what SFMade's trying to do. Appreciate everything that you guys do. I am going to make sure that on our website and our listeners know how to contact SFMade. And please stay safe out there in our new dystopian normal.
Thank you very much.
That's it for this episode of Voices of the Community. You've been listening to the voice of Pierre Coeurdeuil, Director of Advising and Education at SFMade, about the importance of supporting our local businesses, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic and its very big impact on our local employers, employees, and economy. SFMade's decades-long work to develop and execute policies and infrastructures in cities to better support their manufacturing economies has led to the creation of the Bay Area Manufacturing Initiative, which includes economic development leaders from over 30 Bay Area cities. To find out more about SFMade's services, go to sfmade.org. We hope that you enjoyed the insights, points of view, and personal stories from the voices of changemakers and their nonprofits and small businesses featured in this series. To find out more and get engaged with the nonprofits, small businesses, and staff members featured in the series, please go to my website, georgecoster.com, and click on Voices of the Community to find links to the extended versions of these interviews and to listen to the entire series. After listening to these stories, we hope that you will consider making a donation and volunteering to provide a hand up to your fellow community members. I want to thank my associate producer, Eric Estrada, along with Mel, Lila, Michael, and Laura at the San Francisco Public Press and KSFP. To listen to our next episode in this series and to our archived past shows, which feature community voices working on solutions to critical issues facing Northern California communities, please go to georgecoster.com. While you're on our website, please sign up for our newsletter to find out more about future shows. Please subscribe to Voices of the Community on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Google Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at George Coster, and we'd love to hear from you with feedback and show ideas. So send us an email to george@georgecoster.com. I'm George Coster in San Francisco, and thank you for listening.